Always having a senior moment.
Good evening and welcome to the Fincom meeting edition Tuesday, September 24th. This evening we're going to approve minutes. We're going to appoint a Fincom representative to the Designer Choice Committee. We'll
For the fire station.
For the fire station.
I'm sorry,
Police
police
station.
station. Police
We'll
station.
discuss that a little bit. Review and vote on financial warrant articles for the fall town meeting, special town meeting, and public input, some member updates, and then we'll adjourn. Not typically a heavy agenda, but we do have important business, so we can probably take this out of order a little bit. I'd like to get into the, we'll do the minutes later on, I think, if that's okay. So let's move into the Designer Choice Committee, appointing someone for that. If you kind of explain probably a little bit about what that's about.
Why is it called designer choice?
right, I know.
It sounds like it's a, for
Well, it's a designer selection committee.
Yeah.
And
the police station.
for the police
Okay, 'cause
station.
it's- yeah.
So a couple of weeks ago, I was in front of BOS and explained to them what the situation was at the police station. We needed to get a designer on
We
board.
didn't like that message. We heard that. We didn't like, is that was the one we didn't like, right?
Didn't like what? You mean where I was being
Heckled.
heck.
Yeah. Anyway, I'm
Anyway.
sorry. I'm sorry to interrupt you now. Go ahead. Forgive me.
Yeah, I thought that was a little unnecessary, but, so the day after that, I got a hold of our consultant, and we put together a request for services to go out for designer selection. Tomorrow, we have an informational meeting at the police department at 11 o'clock with the interested, designers. These are envelope designers that'll understand what the problems are and come up with a solution. The meeting is tomorrow, and their responses are due on October 2nd, which is a week from tomorrow. So we'd like to formulate a selection committee to review the proposals, make a recommendation, who we interview, and then we send out the RFP, and we get responses from that, and then we select the designer.
What's the board comprised of, or?
Right now, it's the chief. Bob Romley is the manager for PMBC. Brian Pasquale is a PMBC member. He's a new member. Right now, myself, we were looking for a Fincom representative and perhaps a member at large.
So FinCom in addition to you, or do you qualify for that one?
I'm on there by default. I'd like to step away from it. I mean, I could be the FinCom rep, but I think Fred expressed an interest in being on that committee.
He did.
So I would nominate Fred. And so
Second.
I make a motion that we nominate Fred.
Okay.
He's not here, okay.
Exactly.
Well, that's easy enough. I have a nomination and
Okay.
a second.
Somebody else? Oh, okay.
So do we have any other nominations? All those in favor?
Aye.
It's unanimous.
Right.
That was easy.
Yeah?
Now, are you looking for a member at large from our committee as well, or is that?
No, just from, I'll talk to the chief about that. Maybe
With three
Steve.
FinCom people.
Yeah, just load up the FinCom over there.
I'm sorry, can you just go back to the process, because it sounds
Yeah.
like you're saying you're gonna interview people and then send out an RFP, so,
No, we get the proposals in on the 2nd. We review the proposals. The RFS has a procedure by which we rank the respondents. So we'll come up with a ranking and probably take depends on how many responses we get. If there are 4 and they're all good, we'll probably interview all 4.
okay.
If we get 7, we probably shortlist it to 3 or 4. So we'll do that. We'll then invite the selected firms in for an interview. And then, oh, I'm sorry. We shortlist, and then we send out an RFP, and then that's when they really send in,
Okay.
you know, who's their team and how they're gonna approach the job and everything. Right now, it's just, you know, these are our qualifications.
Okay.
So after we get the responses from the RFP, then we'll interview them and make a selection. It's a process.
But it sounds like a pretty quick process that we're getting it going. I mean, that's-
Well, we got it going the day after BOS,
Oh.
yeah.
Mr. Chairman, what's the problem at the police station?
Thank you.
Well, I mean,
Yeah, you can kind of, I mean, I know, so I've seen the report. but-
so, George, I don't know if you've been by this summertime, but you saw scaffolding up there.
Right.
And the facade in the front of the building, especially on the left, is just falling apart. The wrong mortar was used originally in the construction. The contractor came back about 4 years ago and fixed it for free, but said, after that, I'm done, you know, don't call me again. This winter, we noticed some severe failure. Mortar was falling out, falling on the ground. The blocks were shifting. There's big concrete blocks, not the bricks. Water was getting into between the cavity wall and getting in to the meeting room and to the break room above the windowsills, and the water was sitting there, and the wood casing was absorbing it, and it's all warped and deformed. So we're gonna have to come in and do some deconstruction, figure out what actually is wrong. We've done some investigative work. We think we know what the problem is, but we need a building envelope designer to come in and tell us what we need to do to fix it. And then we'll put that out for bid and hopefully get a good estimate before Maytown meeting, so we can vote on it at Maytown meeting.
Thank you.
Thank you. All right, well, let's get into the financial articles. Review and vote on our recommendations regarding any articles that we need to give our recommendations on. So, Cheryl, I believe we have these kind of broken down. I think it's the first few articles, is it not, that we're interested in, or is it?
Yeah, I was
Okay.
actually just perusing that myself to make sure that they were kind of lumped in the,
I mean, a lot of these are gonna look familiar.
right.
The first article is the bill of prior, obviously the bills of prior years.
So there's actually an update to that since the meeting last night. And
Okay.
so we ended up finding out that we don't, in fact, owe E-code this amount of money, so this will actually end up getting removed.
So Article 1,
Will be removed.
done.
That's easy.
Yeah, very good.
That didn't really shorten our special town meeting.
Did you say $3,000?
That's a good point.
Real estate on the paper, you know? And then the next one is something similar to, you know, what you probably saw near the end of the year. These are just budget adjustments as we really kind of look to right-size the budgets and make sure that things are being charged appropriately, and therefore, you know, we have to make some adjustments to those budget lines.
And I think I saw last night, somebody had brought up the point, do we expect this type of list every year to this extent? And,
I mean, at least for a little period of time where I, you know, until I feel like we're in a solid ground and I understand the budget appropriately, department heads understand the budget appropriately. I do think that what you will see, though, is, you know, we set a budget in the fall that doesn't start really taking effect for many months later. So if we are actually charging things appropriately and not kind of where we have the money, inevitably, these types of situations, they're going to arise. I mean, we'll do the best that we can, but I think that, you know, you might want to start just getting used to maybe seeing, hopefully not to this magnitude, hopefully, but again, if we're really being careful with where we're charging expenses and making sure we're charging them to the right accounts, these types of things are gonna happen.
Okay. Does anyone?
I got
Yeah,
a few
go
questions. I mean, I'd just like to look at the larger dollar amounts in here and maybe
Sure.
get a little bit of, behind story with that. The adjustment for the finance and budget expenses of $75,000, where did that come from and what is it?
Sure, so a large portion of that was the interim accounting services, that, before, I was hired and brought on. That was almost over $30,000 of that amount. The other, large portion of that is the assessors, actually. So, a couple things playing into the assessors number, which is about 20,000 or so. One, they need to do an appraisal of a commercial property, which is about $9,800. Historically, that was paid out of legal, which is not in the appropriate line. The second was they had some annual maintenance for their software that somehow missed the budget cycle when they built the budget 2020. And then they have some reevaluation costs as well. That, again, were kind of paid out of other lines that weren't necessarily the appropriate line. So that makes up,
It's just kind of,
yeah, kind of
shoved in a
shifting
little bit.
things around a little bit. The other thing that's playing into this as we're going through, or as I'm going through this process, there are some key things that I'm still using Clifton Larson for here and there as we're discovering things, just because things are cropping up. We're not a large office, and sometimes we need that outside help, so.
so do you think that this number will, this 128,000 number will come down in '21, or will it stay the same, or what? what's
It
your
will
thoughts
definitely
there?
come down, because I can't imagine, or hopefully you won't need an interim town accountant year over year.
I was saying that I kind of thought that, but I didn't want to be that obvious about it, I just wanted to ask.
Yes, so I expect it to come down, but like I said, some of those other costs they're gonna be there, and some of what was paid out of audit previously, I actually think is more so what I consider outside service in accounting. So it's some shifting of where things were paid, but yes, it's certainly not gonna be at the 128,000 year over year. And, as far as the commercial property that they want to appraise, I don't think that we're gonna have a large property appraisal like that's Pepsi, that she'll be doing every year either. So, you might see some years where it's kind of looks steady, and then there'll be a bump for, one of those reasons, and then it's kind of leveling off.
Makes sense. You slide down to employee retirement, or employee retiree benefits, it dropped by, I'm just assuming that's someone that's passed on or and aged out of the system.
Yeah, and one of the things too, again, when we're building the budget, is we're building our health insurance budget, which is the largest portion of this, with not having visibility as to what the health insurance rates exactly are gonna look like. Obviously, we have to build in some people that are gonna come on to the plan, and maybe not everyone we think is gonna come on, so that's an area that we try to make sure that we're not right down to the penny on, because if we, suddenly an employee wants to be on a family plan and they've just been hired in, then we have to be able to absorb that cost.
Okay. And seeing a $24,000 reduction in property and liability insurance, just got a good deal with the insurance company, or
No, this
over
was,
budgeted?
yeah, this was an area that was, kind of over budgeted and used perhaps, for expenses that I wouldn't typically put under there.
Got it. Okay. I'm good other than that.
Anyone else?
Stuff. Yeah, good there.
Okay, do I have a motion to, there's no other discussion, motion to accept the, or recommend the article?
So moved.
Second.
Motion's been moved and seconded, all those in favor?
Aye.
Article 2.
So, building off what Steve had mentioned, this is an article to fund the police station assessment and repair project. The funding source that has been identified at this point is the money that we did not need for the snow and ice deficit.
But we don't know the final number yet, right?
We do not.
We don't. The estimate that I got, I won't say it's an estimate, the guesstimate that I got from the Mason, 200 to 300,000. And then typically, designer fees are 10%, but because this is a specialty, it might be 15%. So we're looking at maybe upwards of $35,000.
Should we, will we have that number before town meeting?
No. We'll be lucky to have a designer on board by town meeting.
Does this sound like a blank check, the way it's written, right?
Yeah, I don't like this. I don't like it at all. I don't like buying something I don't know what I'm paying for.
The motion would have to have a dollar.
Exactly. We don't have a dollar amount, how can we,
This might be one we save to the floor. I mean, I don't know.
well, we're not gonna have a dollar amount by the floor either. The sounds of things.
Probably won't even have a dollar, well, we should know what the design fees are.
How much, do we know how much is in snow and ice? How much is there?
Over 240,000.
I mean, you're asking, you think it's gonna be more than that anyway, right? That's what you just said.
200,000 to 300,000.
Well, it's a guesstimate. And what we could always phase it, we could do it in phases.
So it gets started.
Yeah.
Off the
We
money.
hope that next year we have more snow and ice.
Well, we'd have to.
Well, you know, we do. We do the worst part, and then, you know, you always kind of learn, you have that learning curve.
Right.
So maybe we learn something as we're doing phase one, but, you know,
So, I mean, this article, is 240K gonna go into this article?
Is that number gonna go in?
Is that the
No,
number?
it's being spent elsewhere, so,
It's what?
The snow and ice money's being spent elsewhere?
yeah, we get to it.
Yeah.
Can we get a
So
dollar
then what,
amount
I don't
for this
understand, what is the intention of this article then, when it says from, just, we're gonna find it someplace? I don't understand. Anybody?
See
No?
if the town will vote to raise and appropriate.
Yeah?
To see if the town will vote to raise and appropriate from available funds a sum of money to be expended by the Permanent Municipal Building Committee for the design and repair of the police station for the police station building envelope assessment and repair project, or to take any other action in relation thereto. So, it's kind of.
actually, you know, it's not only the building envelope, but it's the interior renovation of the window casings. So you probably ought to put some kind of language in there, so it's just not building envelope.
This is the selectmen's article.
Right,
Put
yeah.
a dollar amount with this.
Well,
one, we
or,
can hold it.
yeah, something to
Or
get
at
started.
least a piece of the, whatever's left over from snow and ice that we have available, that number should be on this article to say it's gonna be 150,000 or 200,000 or whatever it is. We need a dollar amount with that.
Except what Steve just said is that money's already being asked for
It
elsewhere.
is, and we'll see it.
All of it or some of it?
Yeah, it's-
Steve?
It's another, we don't know just yet.
So then let's just table it to the floor, and that would be my recommendations, table it till we get to town meeting floor. If
Well, we
take
may-
a vote on it, we take a vote on it.
Maybe we just put in something to the effect of, you know, $40,000 for design, because we're not gonna have a design and a good estimate number until Springtown meeting anyway.
That's what I was thinking, that if you're not gonna start construction right away, you're gonna be designing. If you have a decent idea what the design cost is gonna be,
Yeah.
that's what the article should be. And at spring town meeting, or annual town meeting, then we go in for the construction funds,
Right.
because then you should have a hard number.
Should, yeah, we should.
Did the BOS vote on this last night? I don't know if they did. Well, yeah, you know, if there's no money attached to it, it's really not a financial article, I know that's kind
Right.
of silly.
It is a financial
is.
article, but
But
there's
there's
no
no-
money tied to it, so it's, we have to make a recommendation on this based on the way the article's written.
Well, the way it's written, I recommend no.
No, I would say the
Right.
same thing. Either that or send a message back to the selectmen to say, we need a number in here. Is it just for design, like you suggest, Steve? Maybe that's the recommendation.
Well,
Clean it up.
PMBC wasn't even consulted on the language on this.
Okay, so I don't think we need a no vote, we're not going to vote on
We're
this.
just not gonna take,
Non-
you don't
non-vote.
take a
Just
position.
send it back.
You know, it's not that I'm
for
against, we need
rework.
to have this done, but there's
Yeah.
nothing attached to
Yeah.
it, so we're just gonna, sure, Steve.
You get in touch with Nina and give her the language that you want to see in this article? Because it has to
Sure.
come from you.
Yeah. Yeah, I can do that.
And talk to her about what amount you think should be in there, and she can put it into the article. If not, I'll have to wait for the motion to come out.
Yeah, I'm gonna be here tomorrow morning anyway, so I'll touch base with her.
Okay.
When does this go to the printer?
The third, so
That's
it's,
this week.
so the BOS is actually gonna meet on the 1st. And that's a discussion that we might want to have, whether that becomes a joint meeting with them. Because if that's something that we could vote on right then, and also, you're gonna find out here that the library, might fall into that as well. We might wanna be at that meeting on the 1st, because,
Otherwise, we have to hold a separate meeting, because we certainly have to come up with a recommendation.
right, so, in the BOS hasn't, they don't have the article yet for the library. So
So,
we can discuss it
so could we
tonight.
schedule our own meeting the next day and vote on the articles ourselves?
I'd have to ask Nina, that's a tight,
I mean, we usually don't vote our articles in a joint meeting every time.
well, we're
usually-
not, we're getting through these, but that
Right.
one, I think we can probably all agree that we would vote for this one, once we know where the money's coming from and how much it is. I don't think
Yeah.
it's not really an
Right.
article that we're gonna have a lot of debate over.
I don't think so either. I agree.
We can probably have most of our discussion about the library this evening, so that come that meeting, I think we already have our stance. Perhaps, maybe we won't get to it after watching last night, I don't know. But we can at least be prepared to vote on the 1st. I just think that the second, it has to go to print on the 3rd, that's,
Yeah, it's kind of close, but.
I mean, we can just definitely discuss it.
Well, let's see where we land.
That should be a joint meeting.
Mr.
But we should
Chair,
have
let's see
October
where
1st
we
in our
land.
calendars, it sounds like. I didn't have it in mind.
Yeah, we definitely didn't, because we were planning on.
That's on the agenda to get to eventually, make sure everybody knows.
Well, yeah,
Or do we just
we'll
do
bring
it?
it up.
Or do we just do it?
Yeah. Now that I think of it, that might be something we have.
Question out here.
Mr. Chairman, on the snow and ice money, it's 240, why don't we know where it's at? Or how much of it is going to be committed to some other location? We should know where the money is.
Yeah, we talk about where that money, I think we had discussed some of this being used for the library, is that correct? So,
No, it's being used
Where-
as a
which-
personnel compensation study.
That's right. So,
We just haven't gotten to it yet.
right, so it's in another article where that the Board of Selectmen is using that money for, so that's why this article up here doesn't make a whole lot of sense right now.
Well, I'm just saying that they should, if you're gonna need 40,000 of that to apply to the library
Yeah.
for the design, I mean, I think that you need to know where the money gonna come.
Right. Well, and that's what the Board of Selectmen has to tell us. We can't assume, I don't want to assume a number here until they let us know where that's gonna come from. They haven't put it into the article yet, so it's just kind of a placeholder right now, that's all it is.
Yeah, well, I'm just listening at the fact that
Yeah.
you said they have Nina to put in whatever they want. Well, she needs to know where the money gonna come from too. So if they're gonna take it from over there, I mean, that's something that, needs
Sure.
to be known. To me,
Right, well, that's the thing, we can't live off assumptions here, that's all. So we're not going to say that it's gonna be definitely snow and ice. If it's not going to be, then we've voted on something that doesn't make any sense. So we're gonna hold off on that until we know more, that's all.
And Steve's gonna work with Nina.
It has to be snow and ice, there's no other.
There's nowhere else to get it, so. We're just waiting for a number to be in that warrant, which will come from here. They'll vote on it on the 1st. If we're part of that meeting, we'll vote on it as well. And if it were the 2nd, we'll vote on it.
Assuming it's not being used elsewhere, right?
If correct.
You know, just to keep in mind, we can't use the same money twice.
Double entry accounting doesn't mean you get to use it twice, right?
That gets you into real trouble.
All right. We're going to move on to Article 4, the FY20 revolving fund amendments.
Yeah, so this is, you know, as Nina has said, that we put this in here just to be transparent. This is actually something that doesn't necessarily need to go to a town meeting vote, but we did want people, because they had voted certain limits at the annual town meeting, to let them know that there are certain revolving funds, as we saw at the end of fiscal 19, that the actual spending cap for them needed to be adjusted. So these are the revolving funds that, as in FY 19 needed adjustments, need the same level of spending cap adjustment for FY 2020.
So this is your team, and Nina, after being here a bit, you noticed this is where ships,
Well,
things.
I think it was identified before we came in
Okay.
for FY 19, so we just wanted to make sure that, you know, we had it kind of out there at town meeting for FY 2020, so everyone knew that this was an adjustment that needs to be made.
So, Steve, you've been here a while, so historically, has this happened behind the scenes? We just didn't see it on? Okay, so,
So June, when you voted some of these changes for 19.
Yep.
Was really the first time we've done it outside of town meeting.
okay. So we're moving it back in, that's all.
We are correcting what was done in May.
Okay.
Hopefully this is the last off-cycle one we have to.
Okay. Well, we will typically, right, we typically see this in May.
Right, and that should be the only
All right.
time.
So, Greg, I know you're gonna see this numbers here that have gone up across the board. I mean, I know you had an issue with some of the larger jumps before, but I think it's,
These are all pretty small. I mean, the only one down the bottom is the LCTV for Boxborough, but don't we get that money back from
We get-
Boxborough?
It's-
Yeah, I mean, all of
It's
this is, this is
it's
just
all
revenue,
funds.
yeah.
I'm-
It's just how much they can spend
I'm
in a
good
year.
with this.
They can't spend anything they don't have, so.
Yeah, I'm good with this.
anyone else have any?
It's just kind of an oversight thing, right? So you know if they're spending more, if there's more money, that people are aware of it,
Aware
it's
of
known
it.
and documented and so on, right?
Exactly.
This is just a, like you
It's
said,
good, it's a good thing, yeah,
transparency.
exactly.
That's
Yep.
all. Yep.
All right, let's have a motion.
I'll move that the Finance Committee vote to support, is it support or recommend? Recommend Article 4.
Second.
It's been moved and seconded. All those in favor?
And
Aye. It's unanimous. All right. Article 5,
So Article 5
Park and Rec.
is very similar to kind of what we had to do in Article 2, but because it's an enterprise fund, it has to be separately voted, and it looks a little different, but this, again, is just an adjustment to their budget to make sure that their revenues and expenses equal zero effectively. So, what you'll notice is that, and the way the budget was built, they were taking 75,000 out of reserve just to put 50,000 in. And it, with some of the budget constraints and issues that they had, that didn't really make a whole lot of sense. So instead of adding to the reserve this year, they're not gonna add to it. They still have a healthy reserve, and this just ensures that they're, you know, paying all of their salaries and wages and whatnot, and still getting to a bottom line zero.
Paying back the town $55,000.
Right, I see
I
that.
see that down the bottom there.
Any other discussion?
I'm good.
I saw this last night, so I'm sorry if I'm not. If anyone has anything, please bring it up, so. Okay, do I have a motion?
Move that the Finance Committee recommend article or support Article 5, Park and Recreation Commission.
Second.
It's been moved and seconded. All those in favor?
Aye.
All right, the next article for us, let's see, Article 6 was a financial article, so this is the LCTV Advisory Committee.
It is, so a large part of this is, it's a financial article, but it's really housekeeping.
Yeah.
And it's ensuring that the way we're voting the LCTV budget is in line with the way it's supposed to be, and ensuring that the funds are staying within their fund. And so the way it's voted at town meeting doesn't necessarily preserve that. And this is, going forward, you will continue to see them as a separate article for their budget. And that, again, it ensures that all the money stays within their fund. The one change that is here is in this article, going forward from this point forward, the Boxborough revenue, rather than going into a separate revolving fund and then having a separate PEG or LCTV fund, the Boxborough revenue is a revenue source to the LCTV fund. And it just allows them more flexibility to use it to support their operations. The Boxborough revolving fund has just kind of continued to build a balance, which is one of the reasons why the spending limit was increased for the revolving fund. And so that is the one change is at this point in time, once it's voted and approved, then that revolving fund, the receipts would go into the LCTV fund directly as a revenue source, just like the Verizon, Comcast, and whatnot. So the budget here is the same budget that was presented in Article 4, it's just pulling it out of Article 4 into a separate article.
So before, were we allocating costs and so on back over to some Boxborough fund then? And trying to match that up with those revenues coming in? Is that what was going on? And now you're gonna get rid of that? It's just,
What
you
happened?
still have to do that?
What happens, the way it was set up, if there was any leftover money at the end of the year, it went to the general fund instead of back to the cable fund. Well, we can't have that because PEG funds, monies cannot be spent on anything except public, educational, government television.
Right.
So this cures that problem.
Okay,
It's really a housekeeping,
I got
It
it.
is.
Okay,
Yeah.
make sure the funds go to the right place.
okay, good.
All right, if no other discussion, do you have a motion?
I'll move that the finance committee votes to recommend Article 6.
Second.
Moved and second, all those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Very much. All right, on to Article 7. Conservation Commission, the open space budget.
So this, again, is another housekeeping article. This is similar to the previous article in that it just needs to actually be voted at town meeting. It's considered a receipts reserve for appropriation account, so therefore, if conservation is gonna spend money for projects from the Oak Hill Cell Tower, which is revenue that's been, dedicated to them, you actually have to put that as an appropriation vote at town meeting. So this is just a housekeeping article.
Didn't we tie that into CPC at one point, though, so that we could get the matching funds? Is this pulling that out? Or is
No.
It's just calling it out separately?
It's just calling it out separately. So there was a portion of the revenues from Oak Hill Cell Tower specifically that at one time they had voted this to dedicate to the Conservation Commission.
Okay.
And so those revenues are dedicated to them and available for them to use. So they can use them, but they have to, the only way for them to use them is to have a voted appropriation.
Okay, but are we still putting that into CPC so we can get match on that? Because weren't we doing that at one point?
We were.
We were.
Yeah, I thought so.
So are we doing, is that
So there's-
changing here, or is it still?
No, nothing's changing as far as how revenue is being treated and with the different cell towers, because there's Oak Hill, there's two other cell towers. Nothing is changing as far as where the revenue's going or whatnot. This is just literally saying, yes, you can spend it, and these are, this is the project that you're gonna work.
Okay.
Other discussion, do you have a motion?
Make a motion that the Finance Committee support Article 7.
Second.
Moved and seconded, all those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Unanimous? Okay, Article X.
Got a lot of XXs here.
All right, so we can just use the name of the article here just as opposed to the number. This is the Board of Selectmen Personnel Board Classification and Compensation Study.
Which is out to RFP right now, so that's why we don't know the exact dollar number on what that's gonna cost.
It was like the police
This is,
station.
this is the same thing as the police station. I don't think we can vote on this. 'cause
So it's just one of those, I mean, we've seen this
It's like a
happen
placeholder.
in the past. If we can get it voted like before print, we do it. If not, then we can vote for it right before town meeting and let the public know if they, what they ask.
We just didn't know the amount.
That's fine.
But
So-
this is the one that's also going after the snow and ice money though, right?
Nice. Everybody wants snow and ice.
Not me.
Do you remember what the cost the last time we did that was, Steve?
I don't remember. She's not bidding this time. for sand.
Yeah. But it's
It was
Twen-
very expensive the last time.
25,000?
Yeah, what, yeah.
if that.
I think that 20 to 25,000. So we're not necessarily stirring the same pot twice, but
But this is gonna be-
especially if we go for design funds.
Steve thinks it's gonna be more
Yeah, it's a
expensive
little more
this time.
complex, comprehensive to what we're trying to have done in this study, so.
Well, even
Even
then,
fun,
Yeah, you're right, it won't
right?
be.
if
it's not-
we've got, we're looking at 240,000. If we only go for design funds of 50,000 or less, and this is 50,000 or less, we're not using the same money twice.
Right.
One of the responses for the RFP due.
I don't recall if we were
Mr. Chair, I think we just handle this the way
Yep.
we handled the
Yeah.
police station.
Sure, let's move
I
on
think you got it right.
to the next article isn't heavy financial. It looks it, but it's Board of Selectmen Personnel Board, Personal Bylaw Amendment. The only reason why this would be a financial article is because the minimum wage increased, correct? So it's now $12.75. So they put the entire chart in here. It doesn't show, it's not affected. The only thing that's affected is step one, is grade one.
So it's just.
So it's only affected that one.
Right.
So
exactly.
it's a pretty simple, straightforward. The minimum wage went from
But this could
$11 to $12.75.
change based on the previous article, depending on what comes back from that study. This can change later. So this is just really taking care of the minimum wage changes.
Right,
Okay.
yes.
I'm good with that.
So any discussion, any more? Do you have a motion?
Is there changes in some of the benefits? Looks like there's personal days on the back of this.
Oh, so that's just
Yeah,
changing
it's
it from
verbal. Yeah.
days to hours, and it's really just because of the way Munis handles the time off. So it's the same
It's
amount
an
of.
hour accrual versus a day accrual.
Well, yeah, Munis operates in hours, not days, that's all. Got it.
I'll make a motion that the Finance Committee supports or recommends Article XX, Board of Selectmen Personnel Board bylaw amendments.
Second?
So moved and seconded, all those in favor?
Aye.
Okay, the next article is the Community Preservation Committee, amend the FY 220 Community Preservation Budget.
So these are two projects that they would like to do, coming from their historic preservation reserve for $9,900 for the Old Burial Ground Cemetery Preservation, and then 12 Robinson Road roof replacement, $60,000, again from their historic preservation reserve fund.
So I do know that last night, some of the selectmen were interested where the $60,000 number come from because,
It's an expensive
right,
roof.
we've all had.
Well,
There was discussion on where that number came from. I don't think they had an answer.
Prevailing
Last
wage or
night they didn't
something?
know.
Ed Mullen came up with that,
You did?
yeah.
Okay.
And then subsequent to that, we got a ballpark cost from from a roofer, the one that did the Houghton building, and he was between 50 and 60.
Okay.
So
Are they rebuilding the whole roof too?
they have to rip it off, put on plywood over the existing boards, because you can't put new roof over the
Right.
existing boards, and put a new 35-year roof on it, a ridge cap, fascia boards, downspouts, that kind of stuff.
Seems really high.
Yeah, it's not just replacing the shingles.
No, I know, but that still seems like an awful lot of money.
Yeah, I thought it was a lot. So, but we're in the process of putting together the RFP. Hope to get that out next week. Got an email from Linda Stein today that CPC has approved the $60,000. So,
And there was some discussion of, this is one of those things, in the next several months, probably before May, that, some decisions we made, perhaps what to do with that property as well. So this is really a preservation regardless of what happens with that property, whether it goes up for sale.
I guess I don't really have an issue with them doing
Yeah.
the roof.
Yeah.
It's more 60 grand for a roof.
Yeah, yeah. Well, if they don't use
Well,
it.
it's
It's bid.
prevailing
They've got a
rate.
bid yet.
It's
so-
prevailing
right.
rate.
But that's,
You know.
that's a lot of
Well,
money.
I
for a roof.
agree with you. I think it's a lot of money, but we'll find out when the bids come back.
Okay.
Maybe it's copper.
No, it's not
It's
copper.
no,
Thatched roof.
Yeah.
So, that's just money that's moving out of
Yeah, I know, it's not coming.
the which is typically untapped from, it's not used that much for. All right, any other discussion on that article? Have a motion, please?
Move that the Finance Committee support Article XX, Community Preservation Committee.
second.
To moved and seconded, all those in favor?
Aye.
I'm
Opposed?
abstaining, I'm abstaining on that, just that $60,000 number just really, I just can't imagine somebody paying 60 grand for a roof. Even if you're putting plywood down, it just seems like an awful lot of money.
Well, that's not a hard number. But
That's
it's,
what the paper says.
yeah, it's an uptick. I mean, it's a,
Right, but we won't, we don't have any more further discussion, but it was,
I do. I don't think I do.
if we moved 30,000 and it was 45,000, then we're gonna be coming back.
Yeah.
So, okay. I think this is the library our last financial article? We have, so let's see if, no, there's gonna be some more. There's definitely some more.
There's property acquisition.
sewer.
Yeah, okay, so we might as well just continue in order then. Let's talk about the library trustee article. The library building project construction borrowing, you can read, if you guys want to read through this. This was crafted last night. There's verbiage that was put in here, I think, from legal as well at the end, which talked about how the grant, any grant that is used, any raised monies that are used, and when they have to be, sent out before the final money is borrowed.
This goes back to the discussion we had a couple weeks ago with the selectmen. We don't know the final construction costs here on this. And, from the financial perspective, it's kind of doing, I know there's a ballpark number out there, but it's, in my mind, it's a pretty tricky site, and that number could change. And until we know what that number is, it's kind of hard to.
well, the
give
ballpark
blank
number
check.
that's out there, excuse me for interrupting, is a conceptual estimate. We will have a design development estimate, which is about a 65 to 75% design estimate about a week before town meeting. So by the end of this month, the designer will send his completed contract documents over to the estimator. The estimator will put together the estimate based on the 60 to 75%. You know, when we talk about drawings being 60 to 75%, maybe the architecturals are 75%, maybe the mechanicals are 60%, maybe fire protection's like 80%, so it's kind of a mix.
Right.
So it's kind of a, you know, when we talk about percent complete, it's an estimate. But it'll be a design that's going to give us a pretty good idea as to the final cost. And currently, we have over $1 million in design and construction contingency in that number, that 14.5 number that's out there.
So when the construction costs come back, or the design comes back a week before town meeting, we can handle this like the other ones and take a position on it once we know what that number is.
I would think so.
I think that, you know, we were going to hear some language, Selectman Napoli's here, for the October 1st meeting regarding a not to exceed potentially being put into this article. I don't remember. There was discussion, and we did that with alumni, if you remember. We had a not to exceed 4 million, and I don't know if that's going to be part of this article. You know, like I had mentioned, if you watched last night, the selectmen, they really discussed the voting for the library in October, and the funding inside, outside becomes a ballot vote in May, I believe is what was discussed, so.
Yeah, but that ballot vote's not binding, right? Because if it doesn't pass, we still fund it inside the law.
Correct. The way that this is written, that is
The way it's
correct.
written.
Yeah. So this is, you know, your vote in October is to fund the library. Your vote in May is how to fund the library.
I'd still feel more.
I know that's kind of an
comfortable.
odd,
I think we just need to, I want to feel more comfortable about that number, because
yeah,
that site bothers me. It's bothered me from day one.
yeah.
And for us to go out and say, well, I mean, I like the idea of a not to exceed number, but what happens if you exceed it? You get into construction, we get this all approved, and we exceed it, then what do we do? Do we just say, we're not gonna do it?
Right.
Or are we gonna figure out a way to find the rest of the money?
Right.
So I think we need to make an informed decision here, based on what the numbers.
We started having that discussion last night, Greg, and we just kind of got off track with it.
Yeah.
And I think the end result was we're gonna revisit it at our meeting on the 1st. And actually, I was hoping, going to extend an invitation to your board to join us on the 1st. I really think that needs to be a joint discussion with all of us
Yeah,
in the same room.
makes sense.
Yeah, but that is something to think about. I mean, with alumni, it was do not exceed 4 million. There was a lot of cutbacks with that project to make sure it didn't exceed 4 million. The bleachers, for example, were cut back to a smaller scale. And there was some other provisions in there that, you know, as a project, was taken away. So that is a big consideration with this project. If we do a not to exceed number, what is that number, and what happens in the event that it does go over? With the way the language is written, you know, inside the levy to, not to exceed, but then with the additional verbiage in there at the end, with the expectation that there will be brought back to the town, how do you word it? Or a debt exclusion, vote possibly in May. Do we then take, say we do not exceed 15 million, it comes in at 18 million. Do we then have the leeway to come back in May and say, all right, we need another 3 million for the project? I just don't know how.
And that would be excluded. That would be a debt
And that would
exclusion,
have to be a
period.
debt exclusion.
You know, there's language that could be written into it like that, no matter what, or in May, that gets voted inside or outside. If it goes over that, if they want to do a hard number for the vote in November, or October, excuse me, we can vote. Anything over that will be a debt exclusion, I believe.
Not necessarily.
I don't think you could vote that anyway,
No.
because you have to have the condition of the grant that the library is fully funded.
gonna ask.
Oh.
How does that work? Yeah.
Oh, goodness, that's a
The
good point.
state has to say,
So the
exactly.
grant is it's a that grant's the whole reason why we're using,
Yeah, yeah,
have this on the
exactly.
ballot. And
So it
So
goes back to.
are the funds that the library has raised so far, are they part of the 14.5 million? Or are they outside, so if there was an overage, we could tap into those funds?
that was something that was discussed last night. So,
So the 14.5 is an all-inclusive number at the moment. We have, the grant's 5.8. If we're LEED certified, it's another $100,000 to $200,000 we get back from the state as well. You don't know that until the building's complete and has been certified. We know we can tell you what the range is, but it depends on whether it's LEED basic or LEED silver, how much you get. We can tell you what the numbers are, but you won't get that until the very
Right.
end, right? The trustees have raised, we have either raised or have pledges for about $670-ish thousand at the moment, with a goal of $1 million, right? So that $1 million would come off of the 14.5 as well, so. And the town meeting in May, 1.5 was approved by the town, and that will come off. That's part of that number, so. It all depends on how you're trying to slice this, right?
So to Selectman Napoli's point, Mark, if, let's say the construction costs come back at 16 or 17 mil, and we jump on board with this at 14.5, are you willing to, at a hard number, 14.5, are you willing to change the design to accommodate the 14.5 number if that's the way it's voted? Or is it gonna
Well,
be?
we've already done that.
We've already done that.
We've already done that. The initial estimate that came back, well, not the initial number, but a number that came in some months ago was a little over 15. And we said, we have to get back to, the scope grew from a 23,000 square foot building to a 24,000 square foot building.
Why is that?
Public input, let's just put it that way.
Talk to
Project
me,
scope creep.
So anyway, we directed the designer to cut 1,000 square feet out of the building. That's probably about $600,000. So that came down to
But
14.5.
But it could, depending on the site and depending on what the costs come back, we'll know a week before.
Well, we
town
had.
meeting. That could change though, right?
We had a meeting yesterday, and say, some of the floor types are terrazzo, which are very expensive. We're gonna do away with that, we're gonna go with, did you guys decide on some kind of a floor type?
I had another meeting.
Oh, that's right. So anyway, we're already, value engineering, the costs, so, to contain them. So that's what we're doing.
Okay.
And when I say we, I mean, I'm just part of the library, study group because I'm chairman of the PMBC.
and there's, there was discussion, well, I mean, if you saw some of the presentation that I know the finance team provided us, the 300K that's sitting in stabilization, capital stabilization, would help, especially initially pay down some of the debt, but also the 2.1 that we will have in free cash, I guess.
Estimated capital,
That's good.
yeah.
Yeah, so there's a potential there come May when we're talking about the final number of almost 2.4, 2.5 coming off that top number as well, so. Those are some other things.
And one of the things
that
we're
need to be
doing,
considered when we're looking at this.
But you
One of
gotta
the things
remember
that-
that if you do that, that kind of money normally would go someplace else.
Yeah, oh, absolutely.
You know, it would go into OPEB, it would go into one of the capital funds.
Stabilization fund, sure.
It would
Or
go
use
into
for capital
maintenance,
things. Yeah, exactly.
maintenance of current buildings as opposed to a brand-new building. So those monies, it's not just free money.
Yeah, but this is, this is stuff that if the town wishes to have a library, we just need to make sure that everybody's aware.
Yeah,
You're-
I know,
you're
but
in
it depends on
in
how you
October,
explain it, you know?
They're voting for the library.
Yeah.
I mean, that's the vote. And inside the levy, unless it ends up how I think this is going to end up, we don't know yet, that the Board of Selectmen will put it to a ballot vote in May to, if we want to make it, debt exclusion, so. And that, once again, the voters will have another, we can have a discussion, I guess, leading up to that and kind of strategically show exactly what it looks like both ways, what people are actually voting for. And that's typically part of leading up to a ballot vote, what goes out to voters, I believe, in the booklet. It clearly, a lot of that will be explained clearly in that. George, did you?
Yes, Mr. Chairman, on this amount of money, with the state on the grant, the time element that they give us, I guess, is 6 months.
Yeah.
We're gonna have to be in the affirmative that the town has the matching funding for this project to go forward.
Correct.
I hear you talking about in May, we can decide whether we're gonna do this or do that. But I think that the town is gonna have to give a commitment to the state. Yes, we're going to build a library.
Correct.
And we're gonna put up the money for this amount. Now, what I would also suggest, that the amount of money that the library has already raised, I think they need to turn it over to the town
Yep.
as a part of this money, as to where it's at. And they can keep raising money, but I think what they got, because that's what the criteria was, that they're gonna raise this and put that in, well, then whatever they got, they need to turn it over to the town
Yeah.
and put it in the system. If we vote, yes, we're gonna do the library. But I
Yeah,
think
so-
that needs to be in there.
So it was discussed last night, and this, I don't remember which selectman brought it up, about an MOU. So,
Yeah, I think it was Chase.
yeah, so there'll be an MOU that literally states that either all money raised for this project will be handed over to the town, or the money that exists in there currently, as soon as we, are going to make the vote, that immediately gets sent over to the town. So there is an MOU that's going to be created that's going to cover that. I know that was a concern last night by one of the selectmen. So I think that's going to be part of this. But no, you bring up a good point. That'll be a question that, sure, voters are going to need to know that. So we'll definitely address it on the floor. Go ahead, Sid.
Mr. Chair, sorry. So last night, I just wanted to direct this towards Mark. You had said that you have 400,000, correct? And the remaining balances in pledges?
So I think we've raised 500,000, we put 100,000 already into the project, and I believe there's about 400,000 sitting in the account right now.
Okay.
So I believe that's, in rough numbers, that's about what there is.
Okay.
So the money is already in a town account.
Yep.
It's currently controlled by the trustees, right? We can sign an MOU with whomever to say that, yes, when, the project goes forward, the money will be applied to, the remainder will be applied to the building fund.
Right.
So with respect to the $750,000 number, though, that, to get to that 750, is the rest of that pledges that have been pledged to the project?
So
I'm just trying to figure out where
there's
that.
so I think we're at 675 now, and there's about 175 in pledges.
Okay.
I think, roughly speaking, I'm not 100% on the numbers. There may still be some, so some of the money comes in through the Friends organization and then get transferred over to us. We try not to count that money until the Friends transfer it over.
Right.
But sometimes things get counted in funny stages, so one reason they raise money for us is, it's easier for companies to do matches and things like that, so they get the money in, and then every couple
Sure.
of months, when there's enough, they will send a check over that gets deposited in the account. So,
Right. And we would never use pledges aren't legally binding.
no,
So, sure, we'd want to see, the money's the money when we see the money, right?
So, if we're going to put in a not-to-exceed number, we have to figure out what the not-to-exceed means
Yeah.
too, because you might say that the town the town agrees to pay X of the project, right, through whatever, but that, you know, you don't wanna tie, it's possible that we could, you know, if the project exceeded the budget, that, you know, we hit donors up harder or look for other sources of funds, right? So it's a weird dynamic, since there's 3 sources of funds
Yeah.
for this, to say not to exceed, or 3 or 4 sources if you're taking money from the capital funds too, right? So,
And we have to be careful about some additional scope creep, because the fire chief wants the fire road down below redone, and I've heard people want to put in lighting down there and maybe call stations, and that's certainly not in the scope of work. So if that kind of work wants to be done, that's got to be done under a separate project.
So the
You're
fire
talking about
road
the
is.
lights and everything, or
Yeah.
what about the fire road itself? Is that a safety hazard?
No, it has to do with the loading. It's got to support 90,000
Sure,
pounds.
heavy truck.
And we have to straighten out one of the curves and
So
down there.
is that part of the scope or not part of the scope?
Well, it became part of the scope, that's why the project is going up a little bit. But we need to have the fire chief, obviously, sign off on the building before we can open it.
Right.
So it became part of the scope.
Right.
But on that lines, there's other things that are in there, like, are we going to re-stripe and repave the whole parking lot here, right? That we're trying to make sure it doesn't become part of our scope, right? So we're trying to control the feature creep and keep as close to that 14.5 number as we can.
Well, that's why I just want to see what that number's gonna come back, once we should have a better feel for it the end of October, just before our meeting, right?
We're shooting to get the number by the 21st.
Okay.
Yep.
So, I mean, that's why I think that the Board of Selectmen are really trying to lock in this language, get a vote on what this is going to look like. We really, I wanted to, I think I'm glad we're having this discussion, because we need to be aware of, there's a couple things on the table here that we're gonna have to think about. If we meet jointly on October 1st, I don't want any of the language to surprise anybody. This is probably close to what it is, but I don't know, I can't.
Isn't this the same language you saw last night?
Yes.
It is, but they couldn't come to an agreement on it.
I know,
So,
but so,
that's why I wish I had,
but the language is gonna change substantially from this, right?
Well, the way it was presented last night, personally, to me, was very confusing.
Yeah.
So we were kind of all over the board. Yeah, I did have one question about the language that I needed to follow up with Steve and Nina about, but it's pretty much this language, Alan. We just didn't vote affirmatively on this.
and you were missing one selectman.
And Paul wasn't there. So just to follow up, in some respects, the language itself that we included at the end, really, when I met with our finance team regarding this project, we talked about funding inside the levy versus outside the levy and our policies and whatnot, and just it's really the impact that, I think someone else mentioned a few minutes ago, you know, if you fund it inside the levy, you are taking it away from something else that, somewhere else there's gonna be an impact. And just this is my personal point of view, not a point of view of the Board of Selectmen, but I think eventually we do need to be cognizant of our financial policies with large projects like this. And start looking outside the levy. So this language was just sort of put in there to maybe give the voters, the residents, a little heads up that, hey, we can't, or we shouldn't keep going like this. We do have the senior center project, the space needs project that are coming down the pipeline and whatnot. So I was hoping that this language would give us some flexibility, just as far as if we do initially fund it inside the levy, just having the ability to take it outside the levy at a later date and have that documented, that language.
Yeah, it's a strange article for, I think, our committee to truly vote on, because really, the town is going to vote yes or no for a library.
Right.
In May is when we really theoretically would get involved heavily into what our recommendation is on how to finance it inside or outside the levy. And
Well,
that's
that's
when we get
not
into,
what this article says.
this article,
This article, as
is
written, is
putting
right
it
back
inside
to
the
where I was last night.
putting it inside the
And
levy.
that is, this article assumes that we've already decided to build a library. And it also assumes it's inside the levy because it says right there, borrowing.
Okay.
Now, you cannot assume that. That's my problem. How can you assume that we're going to build a library when nobody's voted for a library yet?
Yeah.
And that's where the problem lies. And if we're talking about fall town meeting, yea or nay on the library, and the May town ballot,
Yeah.
which way we're gonna fund it, I'm cool with that.
So you're
But
not,
that's
you're not
not what
comfortable with the
says here.
language right here.
This language does not say that.
I
If
think
you
it-
vote this language at town meeting, then you voted, yes, the library is gonna be built, yes, it's gonna be built under the levy.
Whether you vote for it
Whether you
inside or
vote for it in the
outside.
spring or not.
Doesn't matter.
Right.
You don't have the ballot. You've already done the job.
Here's the
Am
reason.
I right or am I wrong?
But it has to be done that way.
I'm right.
But you realize why it has to be done that way, because of the grant. So we
No, no,
have,
no,
we
no,
have to.
It doesn't
we-
have to be done this way. You can say, do you want a library? Yea or nay? That's Article 1. Article 2, how do you want to pay for it? But this, nobody gets to vote for a library this way. I'm sorry, but it just does,
Well, no, your
it's
concerns,
not
Alan,
right.
are gonna be a lot of, we wanna, you're not gonna be alone with that.
Oh, I
We're gonna
know
have
I'm
to
not
have
gonna be
discussion.
alone.
You know, and the more we get done now, and we can, you know,
All I'm saying is, I want to see the language of the article express what we all talked about last night and what you just said a few minutes ago.
Okay.
When I see that language, and it's not this language, then I'm cool. But this language is the same language that I complained about last night, and it's got to be changed. Because once you vote this article, it's Katie barred the door, there's no going back. It is outside, it is inside the levy, and it's, for those people out there that don't want a library, you'd have no choice, guys. It's got it. There it is. Anyway,
your choice would come on how to finance it on a ballot.
exactly.
Right.
And Mr. Chair, I think there's more work that needs to be done here. We've got to work in conjunction with the selectmen and Ms. Napoli's recommendation to have a joint meeting on the first, I think is probably the best way to go with this. My position is we still don't know what we're voting on from a firm dollar amount, and I feel more comfortable once we know that, the end of the month, or the end of October. But I think we've got to carve out this language so that it's acceptable to everybody, and we're not there yet. At least for what I hear and see here in this room.
Yeah, okay. But I will say that between now and next Monday, I don't think you're gonna see a whole lot of what that number is going to be. We're going off of a 14.5 number, and whether the selectmen decide to put that number in here is a not to exceed and change some of the language, that's yet to be seen. So and that's why, I knew tonight was gonna be difficult. When I left last night, where do I go with, where do I go with this article at our meeting, right? But I do, this is good discussion, absolutely, and
Absolutely.
I think, when this gets cleaned up, we can probably, and I think the October 1st meeting will be a little bit robust as well.
Yeah. Let's
So you
see what
guys-
the language is,
Yeah.
and see if we've got a number we can put to
Okay.
it. See.
Okay. So we are going to, well, we can't vote on this because it's not real yet. The language isn't real.
I think George had a question.
George, please.
Yeah. When did the fire chief come up and say about, we got to upgrade this fire exit road down there, whatever the case is? Is this something that's new? I mean, I'm hearing things that are coming up like that. What other surprises that we gonna hear about here with regards to the library? I mean, you know, this stuff that's going on here, not knowing this or that or whatever the case is, what are we paying these architect engineers and so forth and so on for the plans as to what we want and what we want to do, why ain't we getting the correct data here in terms of what's going on? If that needs to be done down there, is that included in the 14.5?
Yeah. Well, that-
We asking to be upgraded here?
So this is why, any project that has the contingency, right? The money put into that, because you are going to come across variances on many, different levels, be it the ground, there's so many things that could go wrong. And that particular one, yes, we're glad that it was recognized early, because it is now part of the financing of this. So, but that's not to say that halfway through the project that something doesn't come up, but there is a contingency laid into it. Is it 10% for this project?
Right now, we had 1.4 million contingency for design. That's come down to about 870,000. Then there's a 5% construction contingency. So we're a little over $1 million in contingency right now.
Well, I understand contract, I was federal government contractor for 15 years, so I understand the language here about the contingency and all that stuff. But I'm just thinking that, it just seems like we're hearing these things, the closer we get to that we need to say we're gonna build a library, we're finding this, that, coming up. And, I'm wondering what's been going on from the last time they came in and told the people when we gave them the 1.5 for the design as to what now that we have, and if there are things that's being added that, just arbitrary, good old things to have in a library, then we, as taxpayers, we shouldn't be paying for that. We should go according to the needs of the town with regard to that building. So if there's luxury items, I'm for the library, but if there's luxury stuff that's being thrown in here now, no, I think we need to pull back and say, wait a minute, we don't actually need that.
Yeah, and there, the library's been very good about, we have there's two meetings coming up where you as a citizen can attend one of these meetings and have your say. Yeah, so that's where some of that is being ironed out. They've literally made changes based on recommendations, so I'll let some of the board members speak to that.
So, Steve, and Dave, myself, and a couple other people, we meet with the architect every other week. We've been going through the plans. We've met with about every board in town on this, except planning board, which I'm going to be meeting on planning board on October, to try and make sure that everything's in line with what everyone's expectations are for all of the boards. We've met with conservation a couple times to make sure that, whatever the building is. We met with the disability in May, we haven't met with them again. So we're trying to make sure that there's no more surprises. There's been no luxury items added to the library since the original grant. And as Steve said, we've cut things out. We're trying to keep it as simple as we can for all of these things, so.
And Steve knows as well as this, that the only thing that we got surprised with was the fire chief saying that he needed a deeper bed on that fire road.
And this is kind of part of the new building code with the fire roads. And, the chief rightly so jumped on that.
Yeah.
And he brought that to our attention, I think, at our first meeting this spring. And next day, we went down and walked the road and got the designer on board.
Yeah. And I, some of those things seem like they're accelerated or surprises, but also you gotta remember the grant is driving the acceleration of this a little bit. Or if you look at the police station or the fire station, there wasn't like a rush, we had to get this in. So that's why some of these things are accelerated and the surprises, they seem like surprises, well, it's just we don't have as much time to talk about them and discuss them, so I think but.
And it's less of a surprise now than if it was after we started construction, right?
That's where I'm really glad that they're coming in before, things
Well,
start.
like Mark says, the trustees are trying to touch base with everybody that's involved, so.
Well, I think, Mr. Chairman, I think one of the things is that, the talk back when was saying, this is how much we need to ask the people for. And we was talking about a little over 4 million. Well, that figure is nowhere close to what was being talked about about before.
I don't recall that number. I don't know.
Well, I know, I remember what the number was. That they was going in and said that we was gonna be asking the people for. So that number is now higher than that. And I can understand why to a certain extent.
Well, we'll just, we'll see what obviously what the selectmen, come up with for our, and I do now I think we do need to have the discussion about being a joint meeting on October 1st. I'll definitely speak with, Mr. Knox and, Nina regarding that.
One thing more, Mr.
Sure.
Chair, would the board like me to follow up on Alan's proposal to have the article divided into 2 questions?
If that makes sense,
You can't do that, it's gotta be one.
does it? Okay.
Can we insert another article?
If you're gonna make it contingent on a vote, which is what Alan wants, it has to be one. Or else you're just doing the same thing we're doing. You're voting the library, and then you're having another vote to put it inside or out, but you already voted the library.
And the warrant already closed, so you can't add new things, right?
No, it's still open. The warrant's still open.
But yeah,
You
So
can fix
we
the wording.
inserted an article, to Alan's point, just saying, do you want it, however it's worded, do you want a library? Are you in favor of the library building project, or do you oppose the library building project? If the vote is no, and it passes no, then the other article, the borrowing article, becomes moot, because there's no project. And then if it passes, then we go forward with the following article.
I don't think that accomplishes what Alan's talking about. You want an article that's contingent on a debt exclusion vote, is what you're talking about.
I'm not sure I understand, Steve, I'm sorry.
You, from what I understand, you want to vote in favor of the library as long as it's outside the levy. That's what I'm hearing. you say.
No,
No.
I mean, that's my personal preference,
Right,
yeah. But I don't see that happening.
right.
But that's not your
Because
objection to this, though, right?
Because if you write an article that way, the Board of Selectmen, I don't see the votes there to pass that article.
Right.
So my way to get where I want to go is a separate article. It says, do we want to build a library or not? And if we do want to build a library, then how are we going to fund it? This way or that way?
Mr. Chairman, how does the grant?
Am I confusing you? Excuse me a second, George. Are you saying we can't have 2 articles?
I don't,
I mean,
I don't even get the purpose of them, but, I mean, we can do what we need to do, but I don't see what that accomplishes more than just one article that says vote for or against.
Well, we need the article to get the grant. We have to have approval.
you have to have approval to build a library.
Right,
Right?
Right.
so the article that's in front of you does that.
The article that's in front of me does that, except that it presupposes
It's inside the levy.
that without a vote, we're going to build a library.
No, that is the vote.
It's a vote.
That is the vote.
Alan, essentially, this article says, we're gonna vote for the library, yes, and it's gonna be funded inside the levy unless at town meeting, or at least
The ballot.
ballot next year on the vote.
Well,
Town vote, they vote to do an override. If
Yeah,
it
well,
doesn't, then we
that's-
have to push it through, under the levy.
All right.
So
That's how that's
the end result is the same. You're still, on October 28th, if you're for the library, you're going to vote for it. If you're against the library, you're going to vote against it. So I think, I know what you're saying, you put an article in here. This very easily could say, it's going to be funded outside the levy, and then come, like, is that a possibility?
No.
And then come May, we do a ballot vote to see if it's inside or outside. We couldn't do that, right?
It's-
Because it's not being funded at that meeting. It has to be funded.
Your options are, it's inside the levy,
Yep.
it's totally outside the levy, so it's contingent on a debt exclusion vote,
Yeah.
or it's what Cindy was talking about last night, here's the library inside. And by the way, we're gonna have a debt exclusion vote sometime in the future, but the project is not contingent upon the outcome of that vote.
Yeah.
So there's
Yeah.
basically three options.
And that was language I was comfortable with.
Well,
Explain that to, but I understand that you're saying you're still voting
yeah,
for the project inside the levy in
that's
October.
exactly what that
You are.
article says.
But you
so.
still, as a voter, have a vote, and I would probably, as a finance member in May, strongly support on why we would want to have more flexibility to pull some of that out and have it out of the levy so we could flex money
Well,
when we
you
have
ju-
it.
You
to-
just
to
get back
pay
to the
off debt.
same question. I mean, that's good, and we've done that in the past.
Yeah,
We've gone for debt exclusion, and we've ended up paying a great portion of it inside the levy. We've made this into some kind of a Frankenstein monster when it could have been very straightforward and gone as a debt exclusion and still ended up paying what we could afford to pay inside the levy. But you're wrong. I can't vote this
the way it's written.
the way it's written, because that does not give me a choice of whether I want the library or not. Because the way it's written, it says it's inside the levy, and I strongly oppose that.
Okay.
So I have to vote no. It means I'm voting no for the library. So, however you want to fix it, if you want to fix it, that's my suggestion.
Through you to Mr. McCray, I don't agree with your statement on that. I think when you're voting this, you're voting that you want the library, and you're willing to pay for it inside. If you want it outside, then in May, when that's out, you vote it outside, right?
Yeah, well, but you're right. But it doesn't say that here. It doesn't say anything about May. Does it say anything about
The other
voting?
language that they had up, and I don't know what's in. don't
Yeah,
know
I saw
exactly
it.
what's in front of you, basically saying-
But I've asked 3 times tonight, is this the article?
Yeah, it's not
And I've
inserted
been
in
told,
like it
this
was
is
last
the
time.
article. I want to see the one we were talking about last night.
So the one I was talking about last night was what Steve was just mentioning there with the language that says there will be an override vote in May that will allow you to move it outside. So you vote now inside, and if you vote it outside in May, you vote it outside.
That gives me what I'm looking for.
This is the same discussion we had.
You can add that language in there that says there'll be a vote in May to move it in or out.
Yeah.
Or in the spring, we can't really say
The
exactly.
selectmen still need, it's a decision of the selectmen.
Yeah.
They need 4 votes to do that.
And that's a tough sell. I know just listening to the selectmen last night, 4 votes is gonna be tough no matter what they decide to do. And so I think they've got a lot of work to do over the next 6 days.
Yeah, well, yeah, I'll be able to talk 3 more into it, you know? No,
Go for it, Alan.
it may be banging your head against the wall, but I'm telling you, in the final analysis, at some point, and I won't be here then, but some people on this board may still be here a couple of years from now, when this project comes back to bite you. Because it will, because I was here with the last time it happened. So, yeah, it can't get any more straightforward. I mean, your finance team cannot say to the selectmen, you must do this.
Right.
But they've done everything that I can see, except stand up in the back of the room going like this, going, it's got to go outside.
Or at least some of it.
All right, Mr. Snow, let's,
Mr. Chairman. On the article itself, you're gonna ask the people, do they want to build a library? To me, the article should say, do you want to build a library, yes or no, based upon the grant that the state has issued. If they say yes, we want to build a library, you're not bound as to how you come up with the money. The state is not worried about how you come up with the money, because you tell the state, we're going to build a library. and the state says, okay, but we then should be able to determine whether it's inside the levy, some of it outside the levy, how we do it. That should be up to the town to come up with that.
Well, correct, but it has to be decided on October 28th, because the state does care that it's funded.
That's what, well, the yes or no
So
means that it's
how
funded.
the mechanism we can deal with a little bit later on, but one way or another, in this vote is going to tell us we're on the hook for it.
That's what I'm saying, the yes or the
So
no.
this is a crafting issue that the selectmen are gonna work on with the town administrator and the finance team over the next 5 days to get the language that they wanna see. I mean, Ms. Napoli's here, she's been part of this discussion, and I know, this was a discussion, this probably went on for 2 hours last night, so.
Yeah.
I think they all have to be having these same discussions, writing out how they want the language to look, and they're gonna have to come to an agreement.
I think Al, not to cut you, Mr. Chairman, but I think Al is right in what he's saying is that if you say it's only gonna be here, and what happens if it has to go over there? So I just think that the first vote that you're asking the people, do they wanna build a library, is predicated upon that grant. If you say, yes, I want to build, I think at that point, the town is obligated.
Town needs to know
Chair,
how much they'd have to
sorry.
spend.
Ms. Napoli.
Just one more, I think we already did vote on this, whether we wanted a library or not. Was it May of 2019? Wasn't that the
Yeah.
vote that we took?
I think a
Yeah.
lot of people, I
Just
think
the
that's an
funding.
assumption
Yes.
in some regard, because I think we, I
I'm just
used,
trying to find the language of that article.
right, but I used there is an analogy that we can use, and it was with the sewer design. I was willing to vote on the sewer design, because I think that if that system didn't work out, we're going to learn a lot from it, from the study, and how we could have any type of sewer system regardless. So that's kind of the same way that I said, if I voted for that, I probably need to vote for the same with the
Right.
library. So, but yes, I think the average person, not on the FinCom, is voting on it based on, yes, my support for the library, which was overwhelming
Right.
in May. So, but I'm just saying that not necessarily that was everybody's mindset,
Right.
because mine, I was willing to go forward, I wanted to see the design and what it looked like, and yes, it's 1.5 million. It's a lot of money to swallow if it doesn't pass in November, but that's the case anyway.
Right.
So, I mean, I think we're frustrated as a team because this language isn't clear. And if it was clear, you could have an absolute stance on, okay, this is my stance and this is why. And we would be able to, as a team, at least have a consensus vote on a recommendation on how we feel it should be financed. And this is an odd article because it's not asking us that right now. We've already got the recommendation of the finance team on, and we've taken that recommendation to heart, and I think Alan's talked about it on giving us the most flexibility as a town on how to finance it, and gives us options when some of this is outside of the levy. Whether that's a popular vote, or it doesn't matter. How we finance it should not particularly weigh into, do you want a library or not? There's some trust mechanism that has to be given to the finance team and the FinCom to decide the best way to finance this, knowing what's coming down the road.
Still missing the dollar amount, though.
It
We
is.
Still don't have.
Well, we know we knew that coming in.
Yeah, we knew that.
And it's gonna be missing the dollar amount until October, late
Yeah,
October.
right.
So there'll be some discussion on the floor. If that number inflates to something crazy, you're right, then we're gonna be discussing, all right, well, what's the best way to do this? And, there'll be some conversation, but if we just sit here and talk about the 14.5 and ways to finance it, which, that's kind of where I wanted to stick to the conversation. Let's address, I don't wanna,
Assuming the number's 14.5.
Yeah.
The vote, the way this thing is written, is it's basically saying yes for the library, yes for it inside the levy. Maybe if we get lucky in the spring, we can do it outside of the levy,
Yeah.
but it doesn't matter, because we're gonna move forward with it inside the levy
Yeah.
at the 14.5 number. That's what this article reads to me. We may have a wild card in there, and we may get the option
Yeah.
to do it outside the levy if the town votes for it, but asking for that at that point, the horse is out of the barn. We're doing it inside the levy. That's the way this article's written.
Correct.
That's the way it's written.
And then in the spring, as a board, if we decided that, you know what, I think we have more flexibility outside, we would make that pitch to the town and why, and we would hope we
We
get enough
would have
funds
to
to do it.
sell it.
We would.
Yeah. we
Sure.
would
And
have
the
to
That's
sell it.
fine.
discussion may be broader, you don't know by
Right.
May to, or do we have more information on this building and what's gonna be needed here and so on, and so is the discussion there even something,
Right, we know our free cash numbers, and there's
one way
more,
or another, there are overrides in our future probably, so.
Yeah, and if it's not the library,
You
it's
can't
gonna be
keep
something
buying
else.
stuff and building
Right,
stuff for
right,
free, it doesn't happen, right?
that's been, yeah.
You get alumni, you know,
Mr.
that was
Renee,
all
let's
inside.
wrap this up.
So, to Greg's point, yes, you can't vote on what's written there, because there's no numbers there, we're still talking estimates right now. But you can make a recommendation to the selectmen of how you want to see it funded
Yeah,
before their meeting, so they have some sense of what the committee wants. And
Good point.
that's an easy thing for the finance committee.
and that's as simple as a motion of stuff we've just discussed here, so,
It's not like you're approving the article, you're
correct,
approving a
that's a good point. So if you look at this from how this is written here, knowing that this is this scenario, and the scenario that was discussed last night, put it inside the levy with the potential to take it out in a ballot vote. Now, some of us on the board probably have some comfort in that, knowing that we have that vote in May to discuss what I just said, you know, with the finance team, and here's why we want to move it out, things like that. But I know there's some here probably strongly saying, I want it in this article, I want to vote, recommend that it's outside the levy on October 28th. That's what this should be written as.
That obviously would be my vote.
So,
I agree with Alan on that, and it's not to say that we're gonna do it outside of the levy, but at least it gives us the option right up front. We have the financial mechanism to do it if we need to do it, and if we can do it inside the levy, then we do it inside the levy. The way this is written now, it's not that way, it's written, we're gonna do it inside the levy, and too
Yeah.
bad on everything else.
Okay.
But if we have the ability to be more
so let's,
flexible.
all
I
right, so
think
let's have
that's-
this conversation. Let's
that's
try
good.
to get out of here with a vote on a recommendation, at least for the selectmen on Monday. You know, I've, the last 2 weeks, you know, I had the luxury of being, you know, I was in DC and then in Tucson, and at night, I'm in a hotel reading through financial policy, and I can break all that down, but there was a part of me that kept thinking, you know, we have these projects all in line. We have this, we know that the senior center it's coming, and, you know, and that's gonna be a vote soon as Space Needs is done. And we know, you know, the town sewering and what that's gonna potentially entail, in other projects. We've talked about those. So I came, me personally, from a financial perspective, I became comfortable with this project is the first that came before us to town vote, to be able to put it in the levy and then have this discussion in the spring, move it outside, and why, you know, why that mechanism works. Knowing that the senior center, something else comes down the road, we'd have to be we get more restricted on how we're going to finance that. That's probably going outside, or any projects in the future. It gives us less flexibility, let's be honest.
So, Mr.
But I was willing to accept that as opposed to, you know, I know that it can fit in the levy, and I think Mr. Glavy has that argument. And he says it can fit in the levy, doesn't always mean we should put it in the levy, and I recognize that. But I also know that we can't fit all these projects in the levy. I would argue in the spring that why we need to move it out, but I also think that we can't pin these projects against themselves just to pin them against themselves. This is the first project for me that came through. If this was the senior center, we'd probably be having the same discussion, But I would probably also say, well, the senior center should, let's put this in the levy, and when the library comes up, let's get creative and figure out if it has to go outside the levy. So I had to weigh it that way in my head, and that's what I came up with. But I know everybody here has a different story on what they're willing to accept, and that's why, we have to vote.
So to your point, if that's the way we're looking at it, first in, first out, first in to get the money, first out to get it, then we should just fund this inside the levy and be done with it. Let's just go that route, and then the next project that comes, we go outside of the levy, because library's first, they came to the table, the money's there, let's give it to them.
Okay.
Let's just do it that way.
That is a logic that I used, but I also take to heart, some of the work that the finance team did. It's still, everything you put in the levy restricts you to some degree, right?
Of course.
Your money, yes, there's room in there, it shows there is. But we are also leaning on the fact that no catastrophic thing's gonna happen, or there's something else that doesn't surprise us. So, we know there's a lot of other projects, but there's always going to be. I know that since I've been on the board.
Agreed.
There's always something in front of us. So we can't go through our financial lives thinking that way necessarily.
But you really think a wild card like that's gonna pass in the spring if it's already passed in the fall? So we passed it, we vote to pass the library, we want a new library. We vote to do it inside the levy in the fall, and we vote to say, well, we'll throw it on a ballot and see what happens in the spring. And maybe people will vote for it and we'll get the money back. You really think that's gonna happen?
I don't know, but I'm willing to have the argument at that time on why I think we should move it out, to give us the flexibilities, because we know the projects are coming.
Well, you have to have an argument. If we don't have an argument, then we don't have an argument.
Right.
And if we do, we do. I mean, we have smart towns. Town meeting does well. If there's a good reason to take some of it outside the levy, then you make your case and you vote for it.
Yeah.
And if there's not, then you don't. But I would also say, to your point, this is not the first one. Alumni Field was the first one. And we did that inside the levy because there was money there to do it. Okay, so let's get that on the table too.
Well, it's definitely a
Okay, and
smaller scale.
we knew these other things were coming down the pope, but we still did it that way.
Yeah.
So I just want to be clear on
Alan,
that.
I know you brought up, we talked last night in the parking lot, and I know the horror story. I was not involved in town government at all with the high school. And I know the repercussions of creeping right up to the edge of your levy and then having to put, you can talk to some of the horror stories
Yeah,
that
well,
we suffered for 2 or 3 years because of that project.
Yeah, I've
So-
talked that to death. We had layoffs and
Yeah, and
schools and everything else. But one thing I would, since we're talking about projects that are coming
Yeah.
along, we've got one in the same warrant article, the smart sewer design. You can see there that there's no number there.
Right.
Now, am I supposing that number is somewhere around,
2.2?
no, that's what we've already authorized borrow is 2.2.
27.
Do we know what that number is? We don't.
Do we have a guess?
It says 2.2.
Alan, let's just say there's millions of
Am I
dollars. I mean,
wrong? Some people have been involved in this. Am I wrong if I'm lowballing at 10 million, right?
I'm
At building the sewer.
I'm not.
I mean, surely
not
somebody's
involved
got
in
an
that.
idea. If this article is sitting here, someone has an idea what that number is likely to be. Now, also, this is not one you can go outside the levy for, am I right?
Right, it's a betterment.
It's a betterment, so you don't have the option of going outside the levy. So whatever that number is, it's gonna be funded inside the levy. Now, people tell you that that's a betterment, and it's not gonna cost you anything because the users are going to pay for it. And yes, they are. 5, 10, 15 years from now. Until then, the first 4 or 5 years, the town is going to design and build, construct, right to the end. We're gonna pay the whole thing, and then we will get our money back from the betterments and the users in dribs and drabs over 20 years. That being said, we start paying for the library inside the levy. At the same meeting, we're going to build The sewer, we're gonna be paying for that inside the levy. And that is a big nut. The library is nothing compared to what this is gonna cost. I'm guessing, but I'm betting it's more than $10 million. Doubling, maybe tripling. And that's gonna come out of the same dollars starting, not this year with that budget, but starting the next budget.
In addition to what Alan said, the town is the biggest user of the system. So our betterment payment is the largest payment also.
So when we talk about knowing what's coming down the pike, there's one right there.
Yeah, we also need to consider with the library, the grant is money that's coming in, but isn't that paid at completion of the project?
It's 20%.
5 years.
Every year.
It's 20% per
So
year.
we still have to put some of that money up though, right?
All of it.
All of it.
Yeah.
So we have to put all of it up, we get some of it back over 5 years. So there's some money there that we have to consider as well. It's kind of the same thing, just not as long.
So that's my argument, guys. And that will be my argument if we do have the option to, in May, go outside or go to ballot and say, do you want to pay for it in your taxes, or do you want to pay for it under the levy? And my argument to the townspeople is going to be just exactly that. That under the levy, you're going to kill town government because you cannot pay this project and this project and
Maintain
a
what you have.
$500,000 to fix the police station, all under the levy. And we all know that the next budget comes up, that we will get a hit at least $1 million, because it happens every year, increase from the school department. And we'll get increases from the others, but we know for sure it's gonna be $1 million from school or more. Where's all this money,
You failed to mention too that we don't have a lot of commercial growth, new commercial growth.
Well, I was getting to the lack of commercial growth.
We
And
need that.
this is the same scenario we had back when I was a young guy sitting on this thing. We had bluebirds coming from everywhere. There was money rolling in and we were just buying everything going. And then all of a sudden it stopped. But we had already bought all this stuff and now we had to pay for it. And it was long, long years doing it. I do really want to do it again. And I'll make that case wherever I can stand up and make it. That's why I think this committee, you've got to do the right thing. The reason we're sitting here is to take care of the business, the financial business of the town in the best manner we can and in the best method for the townspeople. And it's not, we're not elected, we're appointed to do this. I don't have to worry about whether I'm gonna get voted in next time or not.
Right.
And so I've only got one thing in mind, and that is, what is the best interest of the town? And the best interest of the town is not to load all this stuff in under the levy. The best interest of the town is, here's what we'd like to do, here's why we need to do it, here's how you should pay for it. Now, you vote, yes or no?
So you think that the vote we would recommend that the vote in October is to put it outside the levy, yes or no, period?
Absolutely.
Without waiting for it to go.
Absolutely. That's the
Yeah,
way
that
it
should
should have
be-
been.
that would be your
It should have been that way from the very beginning, and we would have avoided all of this falderall. But I think that if, in fact, we're doing what we think is best for the town financially, it has to be outside the levy. The people have got to be able to say, yes, you've made your case, this is something we need to do, and we're willing to pay for it.
Yeah,
That's my
I
recommendation.
can't argue with your thought process because, that you're following our financial policy, which we haven't always followed to the T. I can look at this and cite examples, but, so when do you feel comfortable putting stuff under the levy? I mean, at what point do we, you know, when the senior senator comes up, you know, in a year or two, do we say, let's put that under the levy, or let's put that outside as well?
Well, the senior center's another issue. It shouldn't come up. There's sufficient money sitting there right now. There is a building that is perfectly suited, and nothing's happened since May,
Well, space needs to.
and
So,
so it's, that's not an issue. The senior center, if we don't buy an existing building, we're going to sit there and wait forever while we put money away to buy a senior center. And no, I don't have a problem with that.
I just wanna get through the board, I want some more comments on this.
I understand what Alan says, it's got a lot of merit. But, you know, the argument that the sewer needs to be inside the levy, even if we put the library inside the levy and then voted it out in the spring, there's still not enough capacity in the levy to pay for the sewer system, so what else do we pull out?
If we use the library outside,
There still won't be enough money.
there still
inside
won't
the
be
levy.
enough to do this.
Right.
Yeah.
I mean, I like Gary's thought process on this, putting it inside the levy and then for November, and then voting in the spring to take it out.
What if
It gives us
but
some
what if you don't
flexibility.
win the vote to take it
Well,
out?
I think we're all it's interesting, because
Yeah.
we all think, you know, following financial policy, believe that we need to make the pitch for this probably to end up outside the levy to give us the most flexibility. At the end of the day, it gives us flexibility. It's the mechanism that, I'm saying that I'm willing to go to town vote in May to let the town decide, knowing the risk that we're putting in front of them, like we do with everything. You want it to be right up front in November or in October, the risk, here it is, outside the levy. But at the end of the day, that's not what we're voting right now. We're voting what we're going to recommend to the selectmen, and the selectmen can just go about it however they want. So
Yeah.
this isn't really about the October vote, this is about what we want to say to the selectmen for October 1st, between now and then. They're gonna make a decision,
It's our best recommendation to them.
so.
Yeah, I think the timing, one of the comments Alan made was that from the beginning, there should have been a discussion about doing this outside the levy. And I agree with that, but we didn't do that. And here it is now, a week before, you know, we gotta make votes, and I don't think that's, given the situation where we're in, it doesn't seem fair to now change the game on all the people who've been promoting this and so on. And I'm very uncomfortable with that. Now, that's, if I really thought that doing everything inside the levy was a total disaster, and we had no plan B, it might be a different discussion. But I'm disappointed in all of us, and myself and everybody, that we didn't have this discussion way earlier, rather than having it now about the funding of it. I do think, going forward, I would like to see, and we said this before some of the other projects, before this one came up, that big projects, and we need to determine what that number is, even if they can be done inside the levy, there is merit in having a process that says if it's a project of a certain size, it goes to a ballot vote regardless. And then you decide how you're gonna fund it, whether it's inside or outside. But if that's really what it comes down to, if people feel like if they ballot it, then they're really voting for it, and town meeting doesn't count as much, that's kind of what you seem to hear from people, then that makes it more fair, if you will, going forward, and gives the finance team the flexibility on how they're gonna fund things. But still, you have a process, that you don't say, well, this one got in, so we put it inside the levy, and so it's a different voting process, and that one that's not afterwards, and so it doesn't have to get a ballot vote.
It's different dollar amounts though, too.
Well, I know, that's what I'm saying, you need to
Library's significant.
come up with a number and say so that's just kind of a general discussion going forward. That's not related to this, but I just wanted to put that out there. But I think you need to come up with that. But for this one, we've come this far, it just seems like, I do think you have to have wording in here to say, if we're doing it inside the levy now, yes, we'll, for the state's purposes, we're gonna fund this thing, yes. But there has to be a provision to go to Maytown meeting to take it out, or some of it out. I agree with that, for sure.
We're just,
You got a split board here. I'm with Alan. I think it should be done outside. And it's just because of the size of it. If this was a $4 million project, like alumni, I'd say, let's figure out how to do it. Let's do it inside the levy. Let's make it work. But we've got $1 million or something, 700,000, Mark? Is it 700,000 is the number we got, that you raised funds?
We have like 675 commitments right now.
So 700,000. So we've got some skin in the game by the trustees, which is great. But we still have to come up with the other, provided it's 14.5, which we still don't know that number. But let's just assume that for now. We still need to come up with another 13.8, right? So 13.8, we gotta fund it. We gotta fund it inside the levy. That's a big number compared to some of the other projects that we've done inside the levy. Now granted, we'll get the 5.8 back over 5 years, 20%,
Yep.
once we get it back, but we're still on the hook for the remainder of that. It's a big number. And I think if we want to do it, we should do it outside the levy. Now, to do this hybrid vote, I go back to my point. I think it's either we do it inside the levy or we do it outside of the levy. To go on a prayer that we're going to get it passed through in the spring, that puts an awful lot of burden on the selectmen and on the finance committee to get the people to come out and vote for it. I don't think you're going to get that. People are going to be like, why are my taxes going to go up? If you guys can fund it inside the levy, then just fund it inside the levy. So I think we need to go one way or the other. And from my perspective, looking at it strictly from a financial point of view, for the town and the future projects that we have, because this project's so big, I think it's better suited outside versus inside the levy.
go ahead,
Mr.
Sam.
Chairman, I think, one, realistic, looking at this, if you put it outside the levy, which the town right now has 12.x million outside the levy right now. You got 11.x inside the levy right now. The town has a total of 29 million in the red, with 5 million out of the water department. My concern here is that you can only put so much inside the levy because the money is only going to go to a certain point and it's going to stop. If you put it outside the levy, you're going to get some money that takes care of being on outside of the levy. So the taxes is going to go up with a debt exclusion, the tax is going to go up. So you're going to generate that revenue on the outside if you put it there. You also have the option, if you see that you can put it inside the levy or some of it inside the levy, you have the right to do that. So I don't understand why you have a project here that if you want to give the latitude to be able to have the flexibility, you need to put it on the outside. And when you get to that point, you'll know better then whether or not you need to work it all outside or you can bring some of it on the inside. I think that you're spinning your wheels here with regard to the fact that do we do it inside, levy, or outside? I think that you need to go outside, give you the best advantage that you're going to have in dealing with money.
Thank you.
So just to clarify, when this was discussed with the Board of Selectmen inside the levy, outside the levy, we're a split board. And we need to have 4 out of 5, the vote of 4 out of 5 of us to put it outside of the levy. We don't have that vote. So that's why we came up with that.
Right, and that's why this was written the way it
That's
was.
why it's crafted the way it
So
is.
I know, and I know,
And honestly, I appreciate
yeah,
your board taking the time to discuss this and make a recommendation to our board. I strongly admire and respect the recommendation of our finance team and our financial policies. And personally, I was disappointed with the direction that some members of the board went on my board, because I do have an opinion about the way I think that this should go. But like I said, we don't have the vote of our board. So that's why it was crafted in such a way. It was sort of a compromise
Yeah.
language, so,
And that's, I know that,
right.
because I witnessed the, not just the meeting, but that question was asked, why
Right.
is it written this way? And
Right.
I think Selectman DeCoste had asked, why is it written this way? And it was because, those discussions had taken place, and it was realized that you had to get 4 to 5
Right.
selectmen to vote, to put it outside, and it wasn't gonna, the votes are not there. But as our board, we're not voting for library or not for library, we're voting for the best way to finance it. I think we all agree that the best flexibility is for it to be outside the levy. I was leaning towards the compromise of let the town vote in the spring. You guys think it should be done right up front, make this article pretty simple, outside the levy, you want the library, yes or no? That's the recommendation, you would put forward to the board. I sit here and I do realize number 5 keeps creeping up in our financial policy. I'll read it aloud if you
Okay.
like.
I was gonna say, what is it?
Unless, and I think we read it at the time of the, at alumni as well. Unless an alternative funding plan is developed, debt exclusions should be utilized when borrowing for major capital projects such as new construction or major renovations to existing facilities. So that stares me in the face, and it just sits here the whole time when we're having these discussions. And I know that, yes, we can keep throwing alumni back in our faces and saying, well, that they didn't listen to us when we discussed that, but, so I'm torn on this, and I can honestly say, I've seen all the letters that the viewers have wrote, and I've kind of put myself away from that, because we're not voting for the library or not the library. We really are not as FinCom. How we vote personally has nothing to do with this. This is strictly about the financial health of the town going forward. And I got a feel from everybody on this board that we all think that it should end up outside the levy, for us to have the most
Eventually, yeah.
flexibility.
Yeah.
So, I'm just, if we want to someone wants to have some type of a motion on what we want to suggest, recommend to the Board of Selectmen for Monday, we can do that. And then, come Monday, we're going to be having this same argument, but probably about either this article or something similar to it, whatever's drafted. So this is strictly a recommendation for them on Monday, which has nothing to do with the vote per se in October. It has to do with how we feel as a board it should be funded.
I think Mr. Chair, I think you've got this split, a little bit of a split here. If I'm reading between the lines, I think Alan and myself are aligned more with doing it outside the levy. I think the 3 of you are more aligned with either a hybrid, or basically saying we'll do it inside the levy no matter what, but if we can
Yeah.
get the option to do it outside the levy down the road, we'll do it.
Yeah, I'm not, you know what,
And I think
Greg, I'm
that's-
not sold on that. I believe that, you guys have brought up, you and Alan brought up very good points, so I know it's, a lot of people like to say, get in the levy, my doesn't touch my taxes. That's, I think, what a viewer thinks in the back of their head.
It does.
That's really the end
does.
result, but it does in a twist, in a different way, eventually, right? The tolerance of this, we know what the numbers look like, we know that it peaks if it does go outside. We know that this peaks in 2024 to the taxpayer.
Tough year.
$450,000 home, it'll be about 175, somewhere in there, I believe.
I forget that.
Yeah, so I think, at 2024, the average tax bill is gonna go up 175,000, or 170. I'm on it. $175 a year, and it declines after that for the life of the loan. That tolerance, me personally, I'm willing to accept, you know, my wife and I are willing to accept that tolerance when we're sitting there at the polls voting. But I understand that may not be the case for everybody, so that the inside-outside levy discussion is huge to a lot of people.
Sure.
So I'm very cognizant of that, but the other flip side is, I'm also very concerned about projects in our, not rearview mirror, right in front of us.
You know, I would like us to be cognizant of that, of what we're looking at, what our financial policies have been. We wrote those because we saw what happened in the past. I would like us to recommend to the Board of Selectmen that the best way to fund this project is outside the levy. They'll probably say no, but that's not the first time the Board of Selectmen has not accepted our recommendation. But our recommendation has to be built on how we feel that the best use of our money is. That financially, this is the best way to go. Now, that's why I recommend that we do it that way.
Now, do you feel that if this stays the way it's written, on October 1st, we're going to be voting
If it-
for what we just discussed?
Yeah, well,
the hybrid version.
I'll just be a dissenter, you know, so. I mean, that doesn't mean the whole board
Yeah.
has to go my way.
Okay.
Yeah, I think the recommendation to the Board of Selectmen, to me, is that unanimously, we feel this should be outside the levy, but we are split in terms of whether it's an absolute or whether we'd be willing to go with the hybrid because of the timing and where we are and the situation where things are.
Yeah, it's kind of a strange thing that because our recommendation on the warrant isn't going to be what we're deciding here tonight. The recommendation on the warrant is going to be what we decide on the 1st, so this is.
Right, that's true.
But I appreciate the
Yeah.
conversation.
But this gives
I think they got the conversation anyway at this
the
point.
selectmen know how I feel. They know how I feel. But taking into consideration what we've talked about here, when you're looking at this article of whether you're going to make any changes to it, you've got my argument up front. It's not going to change, so.
Is there any chance it would get in there without completely going outside the levy? Would you see that at all or not?
You don't think you have the votes?
You know, I mean, given this discussion as a whole this evening with respect to the sewer project, the other projects before us, I'm really looking forward to our meeting on the 1st. And honestly, after hearing your opinions and your input, I don't know how it could go. I mean, I think there could be some room to change some minds, so.
The good news is, that's not the vote for the library. It's the vote on how to fund the library.
Right,
So
and that's the bottom line.
that's getting the people out to
As
vote is the
Board of
important thing,
Selectmen,
right?
That's the way we're coming from, the majority of us. It's not about whether we want the
Right.
library or not. It's
Yeah.
how do we fund this in the most responsible way?
Yep.
For the community as a whole,
Yeah.
is the bottom line, so.
Okay.
All right, thank you for the opportunity to,
No, this has been how we've gone back and forth over this over the last few weeks, and everything that I've heard and read, I know how important it is. But I've always been able to go back to the fact this is strictly about money and finance, not about whether, we need a library or not, or want a library, and let you guys argue that discussion. But I think we can all agree that somehow, some way, this should end up outside of the levy. To give us the most flexibility for future projects, in the management
Or some of it.
Yes, and some type of a hybrid, okay.
moving right along.
Yes, where are we at?
Article XX,
What a water commissioner.
We're done with financial ones. Have you got more?
Is there more financial in here?
Any more financial ones, or are we done with the financial ones?
The next one is
well,
borrowing for water.
Water treatment. Board of Water
There's several of
Commissioners. Appropriation, borrowing, and home rule petition for water treatment facility. So this is for $2,500.
no,
2.5 million.
$2,500,000.
Am I the chair of the Fincom? I said 2,500.
Rounding, billion here, billion there.
Inflation. $2.5 million to pay costs of installing emergency water treatment facilities for You can read this in poly. I don't want to get into these long words. Do we have any more information on this article? So this is just a,
So it's a borrowing through the water tarp, so it's not, it's,
The water department.
Right.
It's not our operating budget or our capital budget.
right,
this
exactly.
strictly rates.
Right, strictly rates, yep.
So I guess it is a financial article in that regard.
So it is.
We vote on these
Yeah.
typically, right? Yeah. Do we have any discussion on this particular?
It's straightforward. We do this all the time.
I hope it makes my water smell better, because my water stinks.
Recommend that the finance committee,
Literally.
Really?
or move that the finance committee support Article XX Board of Water Commissioners borrowing for a water treatment facility.
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Aye, so it's unanimous. Thank you. We don't need to do home rule petition, right? No. There we go. Amendment to appropriation and borrowing authorization for Littleton Commons Smart Sewer Design approved at the 2018 special town meeting. So this is to see if the town will vote to amend the vote under Article 10 of the Article of October 29th, 2018 special town meeting regarding appropriation and borrowing for the Littleton Common Smart Sewer Design by increasing the sum appropriated and authorized for borrowing from 2.2 million to a mysterious number.
Right.
I don't think we should vote on this until October.
Duh.
Kind of Johnny one note over there.
Can I write in a number?
Let's write that blank for, we got a lot of blank checks tonight.
That's a hold.
Okay, so we're gonna hold. Property acquisition of the community water.
Chairman,
Yes.
can I speak on that smart sewer system?
Sure.
On that smart sewer system, back in 18, we approved the 2.2 for the engineering on that.
Yeah.
At that time, they said that there was a 10% contingency in there, which was 2 point something. And I said, well, it's like the system is costing 24, because you already got the contingency in there, push it up to 26. So there's a rough estimation that is 27 million here. Now, my thing is, I think that as far as the smart sewer system, the amount of money, if we go out there and let them extend in increasing the amount of money on the engineering on this here, no matter how you mold it or shape it, the town of Littleton is going to own the system. This better abatement that they talk about, they haven't even came up with the money that they're talking about, that the commercials out there is going to come up with, how much money they're gonna have. So my thing is, my recommendation to the taxpayer is not to vote the smart sewer system through, because they don't have all the pieces up there, and they're not telling us what this thing really and truly gonna cost, and whether or not that they're going to cut it back. Because right now, we have this figure that they throw around, which was the 27 million.
Well-
The town cannot go in that kind of debt.
Okay.
And if you're talking about putting it inside the levy, that would never happen. It would never work. And to put it outside the levy, they said, well, the people are gonna pay you back. Well, that's the reason I wanted the home rule, so that those that wanted to opt out, that they could opt out, but you're still gonna have the town with the responsibility. And if this thing falls flat on its face, whether you opt out or not, I can assure you, you'll be paying in to get the city out of it.
Well, you know what, George, save that exact statement then for the mic on at town meeting, because we're not voting on it tonight, and we don't know what the number
Yeah,
is,
I
but
understand
that's, so let's move forward to the next.
That's a property acquisition too, but just no,
No numbers?
No numbers,
Kind of-
no.
Kind of
I don't
a,
think there's anything else we can take.
no? Firearms dealer license, marijuana retail, zoning amendment.
I think that's it.
That's not fine.
All right, so we have some work cut out for us. I am going to request a joint, to be part of the meeting on Monday. Does that work for everybody in this room?
Did you say the
Tuesday.
first or
It's
Monday?
Tuesday.
Oh, it is a Tuesday meeting?
Yeah,
Oh, that's a Tuesday meeting.
Yeah, Tuesday, October 1st.
yeah, Monday doesn't work for me.
Okay. Yeah, I'll make it work.
Yeah, it does work for me, so.
Yeah.
Okay.
Looks like we would have a quorum, so. That's gonna be very important, obviously, for the discussion to continue. I guess your homework is to, really is nothing. I think it's gonna decide, hopefully, some of what we've discussed gets discussed with the selectmen, and they can, over the next week, decide, how they wanna craft the language in the article, and then we'll just take it from there. We'll vote on what is in front of us at that time. That's, what else do we have on the agenda? Do we have any public input, any outside of, well, thank you.
what we already got?
No, I know.
Be careful of what you ask for.
Yeah.
We're just not used to having people here.
Right.
It's like, wow, we got 3 people here.
Do we have, let's do the minutes. What do we
Yeah,
have?
Tom never sent me any for the
Okay.
meeting that I was away, so I still don't have those.
What was the date? Do you know? I'll get it.
Well, sometime in July when I was away. I did send these out, and nobody sent me any comments back on them, so I would say they're okay.
And that was for which one?
Betsy. August 20th, Betsy had sent me some, and I had
Yeah.
put those in my copy, but
Okay, so you need to review, if somebody needs to look, I looked at them already I didn't have an issue.
I sent you my comments.
Betsy's,
I think I was
I was
absent, wasn't I?
You and I were absent.
Yeah, so I can't.
yeah.
I can't vote on it. You don't have, I don't think you have a quorum to vote on.
Okay, so we have enough. We do.
We have 4?
Oh,
No.
how many were at the meeting?
Greg and Steve Moore were absent. So you've got
You
3.
get 3 each.
They were all,
Be present to vote the minutes.
You don't have to be present to vote the meeting. Is
So even if you weren't at the meeting, you can vote.
Yeah, that's correct.
that correct?
Yeah,
yeah,
That's correct.
so we can vote even though we weren't there.
yeah.
I mean, as long as we read them.
I usually don't take a position if I'm not at the meeting, but I guess, yeah, that will change, right?
You can abstain.
You can.
So I need a motion to approve the minutes
Move
for,
to-
what was the date? The August.
August 20th.
Move to approve the August 20th minutes of the Finance Committee.
Second?
All those in favor?
Aye.
I'm gonna abstain. I
You
just
wanna-
wasn't
you
there. I
wanna-
just wasn't there. I prefer this.
Okay, no, I see that in the past, so. Member updates.
I got nothing.
I'm gonna be meeting with Nina at 1:45 tomorrow on Article 3. What's that? Well, we've been texting,
Oh, that just came up, okay.
yeah.
Actually, did everybody get the email from Nina about the finance
Yeah.
MMA meeting? And
Yeah, I was gonna bring that up too. So, so there's the annual finance, I can't think of the whole word. It's at Bridgewater State on,
December 14th, I think it is.
no, it's October.
It's
Oh, the
October.
October
Oh, the
26th.
Yeah.
It's a Saturday.
I know, I responded. I think you responded.
No, Fred did.
Fred did.
Fred
Myself,
did.
you- Okay, so
Yeah.
3 of us.
I'm not.
You're not gonna be able to make it, so Steve, myself, and Fred, just respond to Diane, let her know if you're interested in going. It's I believe at 9 AM to 2:30 PM.
Yeah, Diane's already signed me up.
Yeah, me too, so. And I get a lot out of that when we do attend, so they,
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah, they're good
absolutely.
seminars.
Oh, yeah, they are. Yep.
and maybe I'll learn you don't have to have a vote to be present for the minutes. So that's definitely something. What else? Anybody else have going on?
I'm good.
Good, all right. Other than that, that's all I have.
Motion to adjourn.
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Thank you.